My name is Jonathan Spainauer, and we are here at Reef to Outback, which is a YWAM base, Youth with a Mission, in Townsville, Queensland, Australia. We have a commercial kitchen here, and we feed somewhere between 50 and 250 people 3 times a day on a daily basis. And this is our first cooking show, so welcome. Tonight we're just going to start simple. We're going to do a little dish that most of the people where I come from eat on a regular basis. Just doing a little bit of nachos, so let's get started. For me, I like to start off with a sharp knife. I usually just go ahead and sharpen everything up just a little bit to make sure that the blade is nice and ready to go. One of the big things to think about when you're cooking is time management. You want to kind of be thinking about how things are going to come together when the meal is ready to go out. So the first thing I'll do is just go ahead and open up this can of beans. I like to have refried beans on top of my tortilla shell because it gives so much flavor and depth. So I just come over to the refrigerator, grab out a little bit of butter, and cut off just a small pad. This way the beans don't tend to stick to the pan as nearly as bad. That way your beans are a lot easier to clean up at the end of the evening. So I'll just go ahead and put those in here, and I'll just let those simmer down as I'm cooking the rest of my meal. One of the other things that we're going to do is get the meat started. So and when I'm cooking the meat, I want to get a pot that has a pretty tight fitting lid, so that way the meat will just brown up a lot faster. Here's a helpful hint. When you're going to the grocery store, don't be afraid to look for the reduced meat. A lot of it is priced to sell because it's kind of getting close to the out-of-date mark. But if you're going to cook it that day, then a lot of it has a better taste because the connective tissue has already started to break down in the meat. So the fat actually cooks out faster, and it gives you a lot more flavor in the mince. So one of the things that you want to do when you're seasoning, especially for a lot of people, is to just keep it simple. I try to stick with just a few main ingredients like salt, pepper, and garlic. You've got a little bit of extra time while your meat is cooking and your refried beans are simmering down. Remember, you always want to kind of do this over a low heat so as not to burn the bottom of the pan. One of the other things that I'll do is go ahead and preheat the oven. Turn on my power, and I'll keep a low fan speed while the heat is getting up to what it needs to be. As you can see, I've already got some of these vegetables pre-selected. I've got some jalapeno for a little bit of spice. I've got a nice bell pepper, as they call it down here, a capsicum, an onion, some mushrooms, and a lime. Now the mushrooms I've went ahead and pre-washed. It's very important to wash your mushrooms because frankly they're a little bit dirty when they're coming in from the store. So I'll just go ahead, get out a clean knife, set this one to the side even though it's only got butter on it, and I'll just cut my capsicum. One of the good ways to cut a capsicum is to just kind of go around the middle, and then you can break off the edges. That way, when you come over to the trash can, you can just sort of rip out the guts. That way the ribs come off nice and easily, and you don't have to worry about cooking the stuff that nobody wants to eat. Now, as we're cutting the vegetables, I'm going to give you a little pointer on how to hold your knife. You'll notice that I don't hold it by the handle, but I actually hold it mostly gripping it with my thumb and my forefinger at the top of the blade right here. This will give me a whole lot more knife control and a lot better feel of what the blade is actually doing to the vegetable. Another thing that you'll see me do is to hold it with the tips of my fingers pointing back towards me. That way, as I bring my knife down into the capsicum, I don't worry about cutting my fingertips as so many people do these days. So I'll just give these a nice coarse chop. Then I'm going to move on to my onion. A good way to cut an onion is to go ahead and get the sides cut off. That way you can just chuck the rest into your handy little trash bag that you keep next to your cooking station. Next thing I'll do is cut it in half, so that way I have a really easy way to get to the outer skin of the onion, which is going to be brown, and nobody really wants to eat that. So I'll just peel that right off, which is easy enough. And then I'll go ahead and just dice these up. Now, this you'll do a little bit different than you did the capsicum. What I like to do is just start the onion by cutting some pieces, just some lines, but not all the way through. This way, when I go to dice it, I know that the onion's not going to fall apart on me. So same thing, got a nice good firm hold on my knife blade, and I cut down, so I've got some different sized chunks of onion. And then I'll just take this last piece and I'll cut it up. So now that you've got your onion cut up and everything, you're going to want to go ahead and kind of give your mince a little bit of stir. You want to keep doing that every couple of minutes as you're cooking it, so that way it doesn't get burnt. Now, I've got a few mushrooms here. The way I cook mushrooms is to just go ahead and kind of slice down at an angle until I've got a flat surface for the mushroom to sit on. This way it doesn't sort of roll all over the place as I'm trying to cut it up. And again, I'll just give it a nice coarse chop. Get it over there. Now, we've about got everything done, but we go over to the jalapenos. I'm probably just going to cut one of these up so I don't put too much heat into the nachos. One of the things that you'll want to remember, that jalapenos really aren't all that hot. Most of the heat of a jalapeno comes from capsaicin. Capsaicin is measured in Scoville units, and your average jalapeno will get to be about 7,000 Scoville units. Now, you can adjust this heat by taking out some of the seeds, which is where most of the heat is stored. This way, when you saute it with the rest of your vegetables, it doesn't really kill it by adding too much heat, but just gives you a nice bit of flavor to put in to warm things up a bit. So, what I'll do is go ahead and get another pan ready and give these things a quick little saute. What I've done is just coated the bottom of the pan with a couple of tablespoons of olive oil, and now I'll put a little bit of butter in. I like to use a little bit of each, just so that way it gets a nice flavor without burning like that butter does. Butter has a pretty good tendency to burn because it has such a low boiling point. So I'll just go ahead and just chuck all of these in together. I'll throw a little bit of seasoning, as a certain chef on the food channel likes to say. I don't know where you get your vegetables from. Where I get mine from, they don't come seasoned. Yeah, do that again. In most commercial kitchens, you don't want to put, well, in any kitchen for that matter, you don't want to put a bunch of grease down the drain. So what I like to do is go ahead and just take an empty bowl and drain the mince off, because you want that fat out of the cooking, but it will clog up your drains, and we don't want to see that happen. A lot of people will use a colander, but I don't need to be that fancy. I just take my lid and use it and kind of just let the fat drip out into this pan. Might even save it for a stock or making a roux later on for a nice soup if it's cool where you're living. So now that I've got that done, I'll just put it over here to the side. Go ahead and get my beans off the stove as well. We'll get out a tray. And we'll just put some taco shells on it. One of the big problems that I usually run into when I make nachos is that those little Doritos that you buy in the store, they just aren't big enough to hold any of the flavor that I want. So I like to take some taco shells and break them in half. So as I'm doing this, I'll just start by putting a little bit of beans on each of these. There's no sense getting a bunch of extra things dirty, so I'll just use the pan or the spoon that I stirred the beans with in the first place. Another little tip would be just to remember, you don't really have to put this on super thick, because you're going to be putting several other ingredients on. And that's a tip that you can use in a lot of other cooking as well. When you're making something like tacos or burritos, one of the things that you'll see is people tend to put way too much and then they can't fold their taco or actually fit it in their mouth. Okay, so now that I've got these done, I know that that's probably about the right time that I can get my vegetables off, because you don't want to overcook those either. So I'll just give them another little toss, kind of get some of that brown. If you'll look, you got a little bit of brown on those mushrooms, and that's about the color you want. You want some of that caramelization to soak through and get into all the other vegetables. So I'll just toss these a little bit more, and make sure they're off the heat. Don't forget to turn your burner off. That's a good way to burn your health, which was an excellent tip because it actually almost made sense. So the next thing you're going to do is just put a little bit of that meat on there. What I've done is just grated up a little bit of standard run-of-the-mill cheddar cheese, which I'll just go ahead and put a little bit over each of these. Once I've got the cheese, I'm ready for my toppings. So I'll just go back to the stove. And I'll grab some of these vegetables. And I'm just going to kind of scrape these all into one big pile. And just toss them on here. These will kind of catch it and it'll help it stick. But there's no point in really trying to arrange this because they're just going to fall all over the place. Here's my last tip. Once you've got your nachos set up and ready to go, what you might want to think of doing is taking a lime and just giving it a bit of a roll. This roll will actually get some of the juices flowing. Now if your lime is extremely hard because they weren't in season, you can take it and put it in the microwave for about 15 seconds and that'll really get the juices going as well. So what I'll do is just cut this lime in half and kind of drizzle over the nachos. The citrus that's going to go on from the juice will help release some of the flavors of the mince, and it'll actually bring everything together quite nicely. You'd be surprised how well cumin goes with mince with citrus as well. So now that you've got that done, you'll just go ahead and pop these in the oven. Remember, I put it on 180 degrees or 375 for you Americans. Now I'll turn the fan speed up. All you want to do when this is in the oven is to get the cheese going nice and hot. And while you're doing this, it'd be a good time to actually start cleaning up the rest of your mess. Now, another little tip on presentation. Didn't take anything for me to turn one of these sideways and just set it sort of on top of each other. But it adds just a little bit of class and people think you went the extra mile. Remember that aesthetics is 90% of cooking. Well, 30. Thank you. Don't forget to tune in next time when we show you how to cook something a little bit harder for maybe a few more people. Have a good night and God bless. Thank you.